Okay, so just let me rub this. So let me write down here. Effects of inflation on different sections. Okay, so first we will talk about is the creditor or the lender. Okay, so definitely inflation harms the creditors also. So let me write down here. Inflation harms creditors So inflation harms creditors as they lose in real terms. Okay, say for example, 1000 rupees lent at 5%, will pay an interest of 50 rupees. But if the inflation rate, rises to 10%, the price of goods will also rise to 100 rupees or 1100. So, but after interest, they will only get is 1050. Okay, so let me write down this, you will understand example. So, a 1000 rupees lent at 5% will pay an interest rate of 50. Now, if inflation rises to 10%, the price of goods will be 1100, but after interest the return will only be 1050. So they are actually in a loss of 50 rupees. So that is a very, very important thing also. Okay, now so this is affecting, as I said, is about affecting the borrowers also and the creditors also. So it is also affecting the creditors and the borrowers also in real terms. Okay, so this is so for borrowers also same thing. Okay, so now let's talk about is the pensioner. Okay, the people who have pension after retirement. Let us talk about how will the inflation affect. Will inflation affect the pensioners also? Yes, definitely. Even the retired people also who keep the money in the banks, 100% inflation will affect them also. So let us write pensioner. So the people who get pension. Okay, so pensioner, inflation harms the pensioners if, now there is a condition here, if their pensions are not indexed, or they are not at par to inflation, not indexed, or let me write, are not level to inflation, and hence will also lose money. Okay, so that is also very, very important. Let's talk about the producers. So let me draw here. Let's talk about producers. So producers, what about them? Yes, all are affected in the society, in fact. Okay, so producers, they are affected, like in a good manner or bad manner. Let's see. They understand to gain. So they gain by inflation. Since, why? Because the price of goods increases. Yes, since the price of goods and services rise faster than the cost of production. So what is cost of production? That is wages. Cost of productions as wages takes time to react. Okay, so because we know the producers do not need to pay wages at the rate of the inflation. So inflation increases much in a much higher speed, and that is why they gain from inflation, because the rise of prices is benefiting them. Okay, so 100% it is a good thing for them. What about the wealth holders? Okay, so we'll come to the last section of the society. So let me drop this. As I said, because all are affected, so obviously this will also be affected. So yes, wealth holders, okay, so they understand to lose due to inflation as their their real terms, as I said, their real term fall due to rise in prices. Okay, so that is why it is also affecting. Okay, so now we will talk about certain questions on inflation. Okay, and we will see that how much you have understood about inflation. So let us talk about some certain questions, and I will wait for your answers too. So because now we have finished the chapter of inflation, so we can study about inflation. Okay, and you have to know what is an inflation if I'll also ask you. So the first question, so question number 1, so questions on inflation. Okay, so define CPI. So what do you mean by CPI? Okay, so the answer is CPI is used to monitor, that is consumer price index is to monitor the changes in the cost of living over time. Okay, so that is very important. Okay, now the second question, what is inflation? So what is your answer this? Okay, so inflation is when the overall general price level of goods and services in an economy is increasing. Okay, so that is it. Okay, so next question, define inflation rate. Okay, so the answer here is the percentage change in the price level from the previous period. Okay, so first it was say 20%, last year it was so if it is rupees 100, now the same cost of goods you will not be able to buy what you were buying for 100 rupees. Now you have to pay 120 rupees for the same basket. So that is called as the inflation rate. Okay, now coming to the next question. So let me quickly rub this. Yes, the fourth one. Define WPI. So what is wholesale price index? Okay, so let me write down here. WPI is used to monitor the cost of goods and services bought by the producer and firms rather than final consumers. Okay, so yes, this is very important. The next question: what is GDP deflator? So what is your answer? Okay, to measure or calculating standard of living is GDP deflator. Okay, so that is very, very important because they will ask you this question. Okay, coming to the next one, just keep on, we will keep on asking you questions. Okay, so the next one, define PPI. What is the meaning of producer price index? Okay, so yes, producer price index measures the average change in the sale price of goods and services either as they leave the place of production or, remember, either they leave or they enter, or as they enter the place of production. Okay, so this is very, very important. Okay, yes, what is Residex? Very, very important question. So let me just find out. Let me clear this. Okay, so Residex okay is India's first housing price index, which is an initiative of the National Housing Bank, undertaken at the command of the Ministry of Finance. So this is your answer to Residex. Okay, so this is very, very important also, because they will be asking you what is the basic things. Okay, so because you, if you know this, then you will be understanding, like, what are the basic things and what are not the basic things. Okay, so that is very, very important also. Okay, so now we will talk about is the types of inflation. Okay, so the first one, we will rub it here. Okay, so the first question I will ask you is, what is demand pull inflation? Okay, it is inflation mainly due the increase in aggregate demand. Okay, so this is the main thing about demand pull inflation. Okay, and now the next question, what is an inflationary gap? What is your answer for this? Okay, so it is a situation which arises when aggregate demand in an economy exceeds the aggregate supply at the full employment level. Okay, so this is very, very important. Okay, okay, so the next question, what is full employment level? So it is an economic situation in which all the available resources of the economy are fully utilized, and there, this is very important, there exists no further, so this is very important, you have to mention that, no further scope of improvement whatsoever. So no further scope of improvement in the economy. So very, very important point. So this is very, very important, because if they ask you, so the next question is, so let me rub this, let me quickly rub this. Yes, define cost push inflation. So what do you mean by this? Okay, there exists a situation in an economy which happens when inflation is happened mainly due to increase in the cost of producing goods and services. Okay, so that is very, very important. Okay, now the next question: what is wage push inflation? So what is your answer for this? So when the employees push for an increase in wages which are not justifiable on the grounds of employee productivity or increase in the cost of production, or rather cost of living. So that what happens because of this, the cost of production. So cost of production increases. Okay, so it's a part of cost push inflation. So this is wage push inflation. Coming to the next one, the next question: what is profit push inflation? Okay, so yeah, when the firms, what is the answer for this? Let me see. Something to do with the firms. Okay, so the answer here is when the firms decide to increase their profit margins and start charging higher prices. So that is profit push inflation. Okay, now coming to the next question: what is raw material push inflation? Okay, now, or it is also, so what is the answer for this? Yes, I'm waiting. So the answer is the raw material push inflation is also known as supply shock. Okay, and it is the most important reason for cost push inflation. Okay, so this is very, very important because you have to remember also this. And as I said also, okay, coming to the next one, let's see the next definition. So let me just rub this. Yes, define stagflation. So what is stagflation? What is the answer? Okay, So here the most important difference between the demand pull and the cost push inflation is that, while in case of demand pull, as I said, inflation, the overall output in the economy does not fall, but whereas in case of cost push inflation, along with an increase in the prices, the output level of the economy also falls. Okay, so the fall in the output will cause the employment to fall in the economy along with the fall in the growth. Okay, so the falling growth along with the rising prices makes cost push inflation very very dangerous. Okay, then the demand, so cost push inflation, because here it is not only the falling growth of prices, but also it is also the overall employment is also is down. Okay, so now this situation, so let me write down the situation of rising prices along with falling growth and employment is called as stagflation. Okay, so now the next one, define hyperinflation. So what do you mean by hyperinflation? So hyperinflation is very easy. It is a situation where the inflation rises at a very very high or extremely faster rate. Okay, and this is very bad for the economy, as I said. Now the next one is also easy. What it defines structural inflation. So what do you mean by structural inflation? Okay, so now this is also an kind of an inflation which is very much prevalent in the lower developed income countries. Okay, and it's in the developing countries also, they argue, because of the money supply and the government expenditure could explain. So basically, it is result of some sectors of the imperfections in the some sectors of the economy, like agriculture, which witness shortages of supply, whereas in some sectors consumer goods will witness excessive demand. So such economies which face the problem of both shortages of supply, underutilization of resources, as well as excessive demand, is basically called as structural inflation. An example is India, when India, you can give an example of the farmer producing the vegetables at 10,000 quintal, but the final consumer is actually 20,000. So there is always a deficit. So these bottlenecks or these problems arises for four things which I had told you also, that is the foreign exchange, the agriculture problems, the infrastructure, or the resources, and this together is called as the structural inflation. Okay, and the next thing is define deflation and disinflation. Okay, so this is the last thing which I had explained. So deflation is when the overall price level in the economy falls for a period of time, so that is called as deflation. And disinflation is a situation in which the rate of the inflation falls over a period of time. So that is so deflation is when, for instance, when the price of a basket of goods has fallen from 100 to 80. Okay, so it is a reduction in overall prices of goods. So that is the difference. The last one I had said about is Reaganomics. As I said, define Reaganomics. So here I will write define Reaganomics. So it is basically a popular economic term which is used by in the name of Ronald Reagan, and here it was the widespread tax cutting and decreasing of social spending and increasing of military spending and deregulation of domestic markets. So this was the situation which was a new economic policy created by Americans after the fall of the President Ford in 1976, and this is called as Reaganomics. Okay, so this is very important. The next one they can ask you is, what is headline inflation? Okay, so headline inflation, it's the measurement of the overall inflation in an economy, demonstrates the overall economy inflation, and core inflation. So what is core inflation? So define core inflation. So they can ask you this also. So core inflation measures, which inflation, but it's excluding the price of volatile food and fuel from the inflation index. So this is very, very important. Okay, so now how to control inflation? I had told you the government has two ways of controlling inflation, that is by way of monetary and fiscal policy. Okay, so in the next class we will start is the monetary policy, which is a very, very important tool. I hope you like the class, so I will definitely see you, join me in the next class of monetary policy. So bye for now, take care.